Emma Harper had never pictured herself as the type to get swept up in anything dramatic. At 28, she was practical, organized, and quietly ambitious, qualities that had landed her the executive assistant position at Vanguard Capital, a mid-sized private equity firm in downtown Chicago. The job paid well enough to cover her student loans, her tiny Lakeview apartment, and the occasional splurge on good coffee. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable. And stability was what she craved after the mess of her last relationship. Her first week had been a blur of onboarding emails, software training, and learning the coffee preferences of the senior partners. Then she met him, Nathan Cole, the firm's youngest managing director at 35. He wasn't the stereotypical Wall Street shark from the movies, no slicked back hair or power ties, but he carried himself with the easy confidence of someone who had earned his place the hard way. Tall, with dark hair that always looked slightly tousled, sharp blue eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and a wardrobe of tailored suits that somehow never looked pretentious. He was the kind of boss who said, "Good morning" to everyone, remembered names, and actually read the reports his team sent him. Emma's desk was right outside his office, a glass-walled corner suite with a view of the Chicago River. She spent most of her days fielding his calls, scheduling meetings with investors, and coordinating travel for deal closings. Nathan was demanding but fair, never barked orders, but expected precision. If a pitch deck had a typo, he'd catch it. If a flight was delayed, he'd already know before she told him. The first real interaction beyond pleasantries happened on a Thursday afternoon in late October. The office was buzzing with the end-of-quarter crunch. Emma was buried in spreadsheets when Nathan appeared at her desk, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened. "Emma, you got a second?" His voice was low, almost apologetic for interrupting. She looked up, surprised. "Of course, Mr. Cole." "Nathan," he corrected gently, the way he always did when they were alone. "Come on in. I need a second pair of eyes on this term sheet." She followed him into his office, notepad in hand. The space smelled faintly of cedar and coffee. Papers were spread across the conference table, and his laptop screen glowed with red-lined clauses. He gestured for her to sit beside him. They went over the document line by line. He explained the nuances of the earn-out provision, why the seller was pushing back on the non-compete, and how the deal could fall apart if they didn't thread the needle just right. Emma listened, asking questions when something didn't add up. She wasn't a finance expert, but she'd picked up enough in the last few months to follow along. At one point, he leaned back, rubbing his temples. "This is why I hate these late-stage negotiations. Everyone's exhausted, and suddenly everyone's a lawyer." Emma smiled despite herself. "You sound like you need caffeine more than advice." He chuckled, a real laugh, not the polite one he used in meetings. "You're not wrong. But you're the only one here who hasn't tried to sell me on their own agenda today. That's refreshing." She felt a flush creep up her neck but played it cool. "Just doing my job." They worked another hour, the city lights flickering on outside the windows. When they finally finished, Nathan closed his laptop and looked at her, really looked. "Thanks, Emma. Seriously. I don't say that enough." She stood, smoothing her skirt. "Anytime." As she turned to leave, he added, "Hey, if you're not rushing out, there's a new Thai place a block over. They do killer pad CEW. My treat, as thanks." Emma hesitated. It was just dinner. Colleagues grabbed food together all the time. But something in the way he asked, casual, but with an undercurrent of interest, made her stomach flip. "I could eat," she said. They walked out together, the crisp fall air hitting them as they stepped onto Michigan Avenue. The streets were alive with after-work crowds, holiday lights already strung in shop windows even though Thanksgiving was weeks away. At the restaurant, they claimed a small table by the window. Conversation flowed easily, first about the deal, then drifting to safer topics. She told him about growing up in a small town in Wisconsin, how she'd moved to Chicago for college and never left. He shared that he'd grown up in the suburbs here, worked his way through business school with night shifts at a bar, and still felt like an imposter some days in boardrooms full of old money. "You're not an imposter," she said quietly. "I've seen how people respect you. Not fear, respect." He studied her for a moment, something softening in his expression. "You notice things most people miss." The food arrived, and they ate in comfortable silence for a bit. When the check came, he insisted on paying, waving off her protest. Outside, the wind had picked up, and she shivered in her thin coat. "Here," he said, shrugging off his scarf and draping it around her shoulders before she could object. It was soft wool, still warm from his body, smelling faintly of his cologne, something clean and woodsy. "Thanks," she murmured, cheeks heating again. They walked back toward the office parking garage in silence, but it wasn't awkward. It felt charged, like the air before a storm. At her car, she handed back the scarf. "I had a good time. Thanks for dinner." "Me too." He paused, hands in his pockets. "We should do this again. Not just work stuff." Emma's heart thudded. This was crossing a line, the kind of line HR warned about in those mandatory training videos. Boss and assistant. Power dynamic. Potential complications. But standing there under the garage lights, with his eyes on hers, none of that felt as important as the quiet pull between them. "Yeah," she said softly. "I'd like that." He smiled, a small genuine one that reached his eyes. "Good night, Emma." "Good night, Nathan." She drove home replaying every moment, the way he'd explained the deal, the laugh, the scarf, the invitation. It was nothing, really, just dinner. But it felt like the beginning of something she hadn't expected. And already, she was falling. Madly, quietly, against every ounce of common sense she possessed. The next few weeks felt like walking a tightrope Emma hadn't even known existed. Nathan didn't push. That was the dangerous part. There were no grand gestures, no late-night texts that crossed into inappropriate territory. Instead, it was small things that accumulated like snow, a coffee left on her desk exactly the way she liked it, black, 2 sugars, when she arrived early one morning, a quick "you okay?" when she looked tired after a 14-hour day, the way he'd linger a second longer than necessary when handing her a file, his fingers brushing hers just enough to send a current up her arm. They started having lunch together once or twice a week. Never in the office cafeteria. That would have been too obvious. Instead, they'd slip out to one of the quieter spots nearby, a falafel place on Randolph, a ramen counter that always had a line but moved fast. Conversation stayed mostly safe. Work. The Bulls' latest slump. The brutal Chicago winter that had already dumped 8 inches of snow by mid-November. But every so often something personal would slip through. One Tuesday, over steaming bowls of tonkatsu, he asked, "You ever think about leaving the city?" Emma stirred her ramen, watching the broth swirl. "Sometimes. My mom keeps dropping hints about moving back to Wisconsin. Says I could get a job at the hospital in Madison, settle down, find someone normal." She made air quotes around the last word, half laughing. Nathan raised an eyebrow. "Normal's overrated. Says the guy who works 80-hour weeks and owns 3 suits worth more than my car." He grinned. "Touché. But seriously, do you want that? The picket fence, the quiet life." She thought about it longer than she meant to. "I don't know. I used to think I did. No. I like the noise here. The possibility. Even when it's exhausting." He nodded slowly, like he understood more than she'd said. "Me too." That afternoon, back at the office, she caught him watching her from his glass office while she was on a call with a Dallas investor. When she hung up, he texted her, something he almost never did during work hours. "Nathan, you're good at this. Really good. Emma, at answering phones? High praise. Nathan, at reading people. At keeping things calm when everyone else is losing it. Don't sell yourself short." She stared at the message until the screen dimmed, then typed back the only thing she could think of. "Emma, thanks. Means more coming from you." He didn't reply right away. When he did, it was simple. "Nathan, drinks after work Friday? Not a date. Just drinks. There's a rooftop bar in the Loop that does a decent hot toddy. Cold out there." Her thumb hovered over the keyboard for a full minute. "Emma, okay. Just drinks." Friday came fast. The office cleared out early, people eager for the weekend. Emma stayed late to finish formatting a presentation for Monday's board meeting. When she finally shut down her computer at 6:45, Nathan was waiting by the elevators, coat over his arm, scarf, the same one he'd lent her weeks ago, draped around his neck. They took the L to the Loop instead of cabbing it. The train was crowded with holiday shoppers and office workers, forcing them close together. She could feel the heat of his shoulder against hers every time the car swayed. Neither of them moved away. The rooftop bar was tucked on the 21st floor of an old hotel, glassed in on 3 sides with heaters blasting against the December chill. String lights crisscrossed overhead, and a jazz trio played softly in the corner. They found a high-top table near the railing, the city glittering below them like scattered diamonds. Nathan ordered their drinks, hot toddy for her, bourbon neat for him, and they talked about nothing and everything. The conversation drifted to families. She told him about her dad leaving when she was 12, how her mom had worked double shifts at the diner to keep the lights on. He told her about his parents, still married, still in the same split level in Naperville, how his dad had been a high school math teacher who never quite understood why Nathan wanted to play with rich people's money instead of teaching like him. "They're proud," he said quietly. "They just don't get it. I send them checks sometimes. They send them back with notes saying, 'We don't need your pity money.'" Emma laughed softly. "That's love, though. Stubborn love." He looked at her then, really looked, the way he had that first night. "Yeah. Stubborn love." The jazz shifted to something slower, a saxophone curling around the melody like smoke. A few couples got up to dance in the small cleared space near the band. Nathan glanced at the floor, then back at her. "You dance." She snorted. "Terribly." "Same." He stood anyway, offering his hand. "Come on. We'll look equally stupid together." She let him pull her up. They weren't really dancing, not properly. More like swaying in place, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder, his at the small of her back. She could feel his heartbeat through his shirt, steady and a little faster than normal. Her own was racing. Neither of them spoke for a long minute. Then he murmured, close to her ear, "This is probably a bad idea." Emma swallowed. "Probably. But I don't want to stop." She tilted her head back just enough to meet his eyes. They were darker in the low light, serious. "Me neither." He didn't kiss her then. Not there, not with coworkers who might walk in, not with the whole office ecosystem still humming around them. But when the song ended and they stepped apart, the air between them felt different, thicker, electric. They left shortly after. He walked her to the Red Line stop, waited until the train came, then leaned in and pressed the lightest kiss to her forehead. "Text me when you get home safe," he said. She nodded, words stuck somewhere behind her ribs. On the train ride back to Lakeview, pressed against the window with her coat bunched under her head, Emma closed her eyes and let herself admit it. She was in love with Nathan Cole. Not the idea of him. Not the boss version everyone else saw. The real one, the one who sent back his parents' checks, who remembered how she took her coffee, who danced badly on a rooftop because he wanted an excuse to hold her. And that realization terrified her more than anything. Because love like this didn't come with neat boundaries. It came with risk. With HR policies. With the very real possibility that if it went wrong, she'd lose more than a boyfriend. She'd lose her job, her stability, the life she'd carefully built. Still, as the train rattled north through the snowy night, she couldn't bring herself to regret a single second. Winter tightened its grip on Chicago. By mid-December, the lake wind cut through coats like glass, and the office windows stayed fogged from morning until the heating kicked in hard at noon. Emma found herself counting days, not to Christmas, but to the moments she could steal with Nathan. They'd settled into a careful rhythm. No more rooftop bars or train rides pressed too close. Instead, it was after-hours work that stretched longer than necessary. He'd ask her to stay late to review a pitch deck, and somehow the two of them would end up on the leather couch in his office, takeout containers open between them, city lights painting stripes across the carpet. They talked about everything except what they were doing. One evening, snow falling thick outside, Nathan closed his laptop and looked at her across the low table. "You ever get tired of being the one who holds everything together?" Emma paused mid-bite of cold lo mein. "All the time. But someone has to." He nodded. "I know the feeling. Except I'm the one who's supposed to have it all figured out. Managing director. Rainmaker. Whatever they call it in the hallway." He gave a small, tired laugh. "Half the time I'm just trying not to screw up the next quarter." She set her chopsticks down. "You don't give yourself enough credit." People stay late because they want to work for you, not because they're scared of you. He studied her face. You included. Her pulse jumped. Especially me. The room felt smaller. He reached across the table, brushed his thumb over her knuckles. Just once, light enough she could pretend it hadn't happened if she wanted to. She didn't. They didn't kiss that night either. But when she left at 10:30, he walked her to the elevator bank, waited until the doors opened, then said quietly, "Merry Christmas, Emma. If I don't see you before the break." She smiled, throat tight. "Merry Christmas, Nathan." The office closed for the week between Christmas and New Year's. Emma went back to Wisconsin for 4 days, her mom's tiny ranch house smelling of cinnamon and pine, her younger brother home from college with his new girlfriend. She helped frost cookies, watched bad Hallmark movies, answered the inevitable questions about dating. Still single, she said, and it wasn't technically a lie. But every time her phone buzzed, her heart lurched hoping it was him. He texted on the 26th. "Nathan, survived the family interrogation?" "Emma, barely. Mom asked if I'm seeing anyone nice." "Nathan, and you said?" "Emma, I said I'm focused on work." "Which is true." "Mostly." "Nathan, mostly is enough for now." She stared at the screen until it blurred, then typed the bravest thing she'd said yet. "Emma, I miss you." A long pause. 3 dots. Then, "Nathan, I miss you too. More than I should." They didn't text again until New Year's Eve. She was back in her Lakeview apartment, alone with a bottle of cheap Prosecco and Netflix queued up. At 11:47 p.m., her phone lit up. "Nathan, you up?" "Emma, watching the ball drop with zero enthusiasm." "You?" "Nathan, at my place. Alone." Same vibe. Then, after a beat. "Nathan, can I call you at midnight?" Her hands shook as she typed yes. The call came right as the fireworks started over the lake. She answered on the second ring. "Happy New Year," he said, voice low and rough like he hadn't used it in hours. "Happy New Year." She curled into the corner of her couch, blanket pulled tight. "Where are you?" "Living room. Looking at the skyline. Wishing I was somewhere else." "Where?" A pause. "With you." She closed her eyes. "Nathan." "I know," he said quickly. "I know we're playing with fire. I know the policy. I know all the reasons this is reckless." He exhaled. "But I can't pretend I don't feel it. I've tried." "Me too," she whispered. Another beat of silence, broken only by distant cheers from her TV. "I'm not asking for anything tonight," he said. "I just needed to hear your voice. Needed you to know." "I know," she said. "And I feel the same." They stayed on the phone until almost 2, talking about nothing and everything. Childhood memories, worst first dates, the way snow sounded different in the city than it did in the suburbs. When they finally hung up, Emma sat in the dark for a long time, heart full and aching. Back at work in January, the tension was unbearable in the best way. Stolen glances across conference rooms. The brush of shoulders in the copy room. A post-it note on her monitor one morning that read simply, "Dinner tonight? My place. 7. She stared at it for 10 minutes before folding it into her pocket. That night she showed up at his high-rise in Streeterville with a bottle of red and nerves that felt like live wires. He opened the door in jeans and a gray sweater, casual in a way she'd never seen at the office, and the sight of him undone made her breath catch. "Come in," he said, taking the wine. "I made pasta. Nothing fancy." The apartment was modern but lived in. Books stacked on the coffee table, a guitar leaning against the wall, floor-to-ceiling windows showing the glittering lake. They ate at the kitchen island, knees touching under the counter. Conversation stayed light until the plates were cleared. Then he set his glass down and looked at her. "I've been thinking about this for months," he said. "About what happens if we do this. About what happens if we don't." Emma's mouth went dry. And I'm done pretending I can keep it professional." He reached for her hand, threaded their fingers together. "I want to be with you. Really with you. Not just late nights at the office. Not just texts. All of it." Her heart slammed against her ribs. "What about work? HR? If anyone finds out." "We'll be careful," he said. "Discreet. No public displays, no overlap in projects if we can help it. I'll talk to legal tomorrow, quietly, see what the actual risks are. But I don't want to hide forever. Just until we figure out how to do this right." She searched his face. No hesitation. No game. "Okay," she said softly. He exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for weeks. Then he leaned in, slow enough she could stop him if she wanted. She didn't. The kiss was gentle at first, testing, almost careful. Then deeper, hungrier, like they'd both been starving for it. His hands slid to her waist, hers to his shoulders, and for the first time since that first dinner, there was no line left to cross. They'd already crossed it. When they finally pulled apart, foreheads resting together, he whispered, "Stay." She nodded against him. "I'm not going anywhere." Outside, the city hummed on, indifferent. Inside his apartment, two people who'd spent months circling each other finally stopped running. But even in the glow of that first real night together, Emma felt the shadow at the edge of her mind, the knowledge that secrets like this never stayed secret forever. And when they did come out, nothing would be the same. The first 3 months of 2026 passed in a careful blur of secrecy and stolen time. Emma and Nathan became experts at discretion. They never arrived or left the office together. They avoided the same elevators when possible. Lunch breaks were staggered, and any after-hours work was logged with vague descriptions like document review or investor prep. In the office, they were professional to the point of almost cold, short nods, clipped emails, no lingering eye contact. It was exhausting, but it worked. Outside the office, though, they were different people. Weekends became sacred. Saturday mornings found them at his place, sunlight slanting through the blinds while coffee brewed and jazz played low on the speakers. They cooked together, nothing gourmet, just scrambled eggs, toast, whatever was in the fridge. He taught her how to make his mom's banana bread recipe. She showed him how to properly fold a fitted sheet. He still failed spectacularly. They binge-watched old seasons of The West Wing, argued about whether Aaron Sorkin dialogue was realistic, and fell asleep tangled on the couch more nights than not. Weeknights were rarer, but when they happened, they felt electric. A quiet dinner at a small Italian place in Wicker Park where no one from Vanguard ever went. A walk along the lakefront path when the wind wasn't brutal, hands in pockets but shoulders brushing. Once, on a rare mild February evening, they sat on a bench near Navy Pier and watched the ice chunks float in the water while he told her about the first deal he'd ever closed, how he'd thrown up in the bathroom afterward from nerves. "You," she teased. "Mr. Confident." "Still do sometimes," he admitted. "Just better at hiding it." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I like knowing you're human." He kissed the top of her head. "Only with you." The physical side deepened too, not rushed, but steady. Every touch felt like confirmation. This was real. This was theirs. She learned the scar on his left shoulder from a high school football injury, the way he sighed when she kissed the spot behind his ear, how his hand always found the small of her back when they walked. He learned she hated having her feet touched, loved when he read aloud from whatever book he was in the middle of, and fell asleep fastest when he traced slow circles on her palm. But cracks started appearing in March. It began small. A junior associate, Mia, noticed Emma leaving Nathan's office late one evening and made a casual joke in the break room the next day. "You two are always the last ones here. Power couple energy or what?" Everyone laughed it off. Emma smiled tightly and changed the subject. But the comment lingered. Then came the anonymous email to HR. It arrived on a Thursday afternoon while Nathan was in New York for a closing. The subject line read simply, "Concern." The body was short. "There appears to be an inappropriate relationship between managing director Nathan Cole and his executive assistant Emma Harper. Multiple late-night office sessions, frequent private lunches, and observed personal familiarity. Please investigate to ensure compliance with company policy." No signature. No proof. Just enough to trigger protocol. HR called Emma in first. A polite woman named Carla in her 50s sat across a small conference table with a notepad and a neutral expression. "We received an anonymous tip," Carla began. "I want to stress this is routine. We have to follow up on any report. Can you tell me about your working relationship with Mr. Cole?" Emma's stomach dropped, but she kept her voice even. Professional. I handle his schedule, travel, documents. We work long hours sometimes, quarter end, deal closings. That's it. Carla nodded. And any personal interactions outside work? No, the lie tasted sour. They asked the same questions of Nathan when he returned the next Monday. He gave the same answers, calm and measured. No evidence surfaced, no photos, no texts, no witnesses willing to go on record. The investigation closed after 10 days with a finding of insufficient evidence to substantiate. But the memo went into both their files, reminder of company policy regarding workplace relationships. Any future concerns may result in disciplinary action. The damage was done. That night at his apartment, they sat on the floor with their backs against the couch, a half-empty bottle of wine between them. "We were careful," Emma said quietly. "Not careful enough." Nathan rubbed his face. "Someone saw something. Or suspected. And now it's in our files." She pulled her knees to her chest. "What if it happens again? What if next time they have proof?" He looked at her, eyes tired. "Then we deal with it. But I'm not walking away from this, from us, because someone sent a cowardly email." "I'm not either," she said. "But I'm scared. I like my job. I like the life I've built. If I lose it, you won't." He reached for her hand. "If it comes to that, I'll resign. You keep the job. I can find another one." "No," she shook her head hard. "That's not fair. You've worked years for this. I'm not making you give it up. We're not deciding tonight." He pulled her closer until she was leaning against his chest. "We just keep going. Carefully. And we start thinking about what comes next. Long term." She nodded against him, listening to his heartbeat. "I love you," she whispered, the first time she'd said it out loud. He stilled, then tilted her chin up so he could see her face. "I love you too. Been meaning to say it for weeks." They kissed slowly, like they were sealing a promise. But in the quiet after, while he slept beside her, Emma stared at the ceiling and felt the weight settle heavier. Love wasn't enough on its own. Not here. Not with everything stacked against them. They had maybe 6 more months before the next shoe dropped. Another rumor, another email, a careless moment caught on camera. And when it did, one of them would have to choose. The career they'd fought for, or the person they couldn't imagine losing. She wasn't sure which one she'd pick. And that uncertainty kept her awake long after the city lights dimmed. Spring arrived in Chicago like an apology. Warm days that melted the last dirty snowbanks, tulips pushing through planters along Michigan Avenue, people shedding coats and emerging onto sidewalks again. For Emma and Nathan, though, the season brought no relief. The HR memo hung over them like a low cloud, always there, never quite gone. They tried to keep things steady. No more late nights at the office. No shared lunches in the building. They met outside Vanguard's radius. Different neighborhoods, different bars, different restaurants. Weekends were still theirs, but even those felt guarded now. Every time the phone buzzed, Emma flinched, half expecting another anonymous tip. In April, Nathan was promoted. The announcement came in an all-staff email. Nathan Cole named partner. A step most people spent a decade chasing. He'd closed 3 major deals in the last year, brought in new institutional money, earned the board's trust. The office threw a small celebration in the conference room. Champagne, catered sandwiches, forced smiles from the senior partners who'd once dismissed him as the kid from Naperville. Emma stood near the back, clapping politely while her stomach twisted. Partner meant more visibility, more scrutiny, more travel, and a salary bump that would make any resignation look like career suicide. That night they met at a quiet brewery in Logan Square, far from the loop. They took a corner booth, ordered IPAs, and waited until the server walked away. "Congratulations," she said, raising her glass. Her voice sounded thin. He clinked his against hers but didn't drink. "It doesn't change anything. It changes everything." He looked down at the table, tracing a ring of condensation with his thumb. "I know." They sat in silence for a long minute. "I've been thinking," he said finally, "about what happens next. I could transfer to the New York office. Different city, different reporting line. We could still see each other, no direct supervision. Or, you could come with me. Find something there. We start fresh. Emma stared at him. You'd leave Chicago? Your family's here. Your life's here. My life's wherever you are. He met her eyes. I'm serious, Sam. I've spent years building this career because I thought it was the only thing that mattered. Turns out it's not. Her throat tightened. And if I say no, if I want to stay, then I stay too. We figure it out. But we can't keep doing this half-in, half-out thing. It's eating us both alive. She looked away, toward the bar where a couple laughed over shared fries. Simple. Easy. No policies. No anonymous emails. No ticking clock. I love you, she said quietly. But I'm terrified of what happens when the next rumor starts. Or when someone sees us at the wrong moment. I don't want to be the reason you throw away everything you've worked for. And I don't want to lose everything I've built either. He reached across the table, covered her hand with his. Then let's stop hiding. We go to HR together. We disclose. We follow whatever process they have, mediation, reassignment, whatever. If they force one of us out, we'll deal with it. Together. Emma's pulse roared in her ears. You'd risk your partnership? For us? Yes. She searched his face. Steady, certain. No trace of doubt. Okay, she whispered. The next Monday, they walked into HR together. Carla looked surprised, but not shocked. She listened without interrupting while Nathan explained. The relationship had begun after hours, outside work initially. They tried to keep it separate from the office. They were disclosing now because they wanted to do it right. Emma added that she was willing to transfer teams or departments if needed. Carla took notes, asked a few questions, then excused herself to consult with legal. They waited in silence for 45 minutes that felt like years. When Carla returned, her expression was careful. The firm's policy allows relationships with disclosure and mitigation of conflicts. Since there's no direct reporting conflict beyond your current assistant role, we can reassign Emma to the investor relations team effective next month. Same level, same pay. No formal discipline, but this goes on record. Any future issues, and we revisit. Nathan exhaled. That's it. That's it, Carla said. Provided you both maintain professionalism in the office. No exceptions. They left the building in a daze, stepping into sunlight that felt too bright. On the sidewalk, Nathan pulled Emma into a quick, fierce hug, right there on Michigan Avenue, in front of God and everyone. She laughed against his shoulder, shaky and relieved. We did it, she said. We did. They walked to Millennium Park, found a bench near the Bean, and sat shoulder to shoulder watching tourists take selfies. I'm still scared, she admitted. Me too, he said. But not as scared as I was pretending everything was fine. She leaned into him. What now? Now we figure out the rest. Dates in public. Introducing each other to friends. Maybe even telling my parents I'm dating someone who's smarter than me. She smiled. Your mom's going to love that. She'll love you, he said simply. That night they went back to his place. Not sneaking, not rushing. Just two people who'd finally stopped running. They cooked dinner together, opened wine, talked about apartments bigger than hers, about trips they wanted to take. Maybe Colorado in the fall, maybe somewhere warm when winter hit again. Normal things. Future things. When they went to bed, he held her close, her head on his chest, his fingers threading through her hair. I'm proud of us, he murmured into the dark. Emma closed her eyes, listening to his heartbeat. Steady, sure. So am I. For the first time in months, sleep came easily. Summer settled over Chicago like a warm blanket. Long days, lake breezes, the kind of light that made everything feel possible. By July 2026, Emma had been on the investor relations team for 4 months. Her new desk was on the 15th floor, 2 departments away from Nathan's corner office. They still saw each other every day, quick hellos in the hallway, the occasional group meeting, but the distance gave them breathing room. No more whispered rumors in the break room. No more sideways glances when they passed in the lobby. The office had moved on to fresher gossip. They didn't hide anymore. Not exactly. They weren't posting couple selfies or holding hands in the elevator, but they weren't pretending either. Friday evenings sometimes found them leaving together, separately, but ending up at the same bar in River North. Co-workers who noticed stopped asking questions after the first few polite deflections. HR's file note stayed buried. No one cared enough to dig it up again. One Saturday in late August, Nathan drove them out to Naperville. His parents' house was the same split level he'd grown up in, red brick, neat lawn, basketball hoops still bolted above the garage. Emma's stomach knotted the whole ride there. She'd met boyfriends' families before, but never like this. No label yet, no ring, just the quiet certainty that this was the person she wanted to build something permanent with. His mom, Linda, opened the door before they even knocked. She was small, silver-haired, with Nathan's blue eyes and a smile that crinkled the corners. "You must be Emma," she said, pulling her into a hug like they'd known each other for years. "He's been talking about you non-stop." Nathan groaned. "Mom." Linda waved him off. Come in. Your dad's on the grill. We're doing burgers and that potato salad you like." The afternoon unfolded slowly. Backyard, iced tea, stories about Nathan as a kid. He'd once tried to invest his allowance in a lemonade stand and lost it all to bad weather. His dad, Tom, a retired math teacher with a dry sense of humor, asked Emma about her job, listened carefully, then said, "Sounds like you keep the place running. That's more valuable than most of the suits realize." Emma smiled. "I try." Later, when Linda was showing her old photo albums in the living room, Nathan slipped out to help his dad with the grill. Tom flipped a burger, then glanced sideways. "She's good for you." Nathan nodded. "Yeah, she is. You going to do something about it?" Nathan looked toward the house where Emma was laughing at something his mom said. "Working on it." Back in the city that evening, they walked along the lakefront. The sky was turning pink and gold, sailboats dotting the water like paper cutouts. They found their usual bench near Oak Street Beach and sat close, thighs touching. "Your parents are wonderful," Emma said. "They liked you. A lot." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I liked them too." A comfortable quiet settled. Then Nathan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Emma's breath caught. He didn't open it right away. "I've been carrying this around for a month," he admitted. "Trying to find the perfect moment. Turns out there's no such thing, just the right person and the right now." He opened the box. Inside was a simple solitaire diamond. Classic, elegant, nothing flashy. Exactly her taste. "Emma Harper," he said, voice steady but thick with emotion, "I want the rest of it. The fight's over who controls the thermostat. The lazy Sundays. The trips we keep putting off. The life we build together. Marry me." Tears blurred her vision. She laughed through them. "Yes. God, yes." He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, and then he kissed her, slow and deep, right there on the bench with the city humming behind them and the lake stretching out forever. They stayed until the sky went dark and the lights came on across the water. When they finally stood to leave, hands linked, Emma glanced at the ring catching the streetlight. "We're going to have to tell HR again," she said, half teasing. Nathan grinned. "Let them update the file. This time it's official." The wedding was small, early the following spring, just family and a handful of close friends, at a venue overlooking the river. Emma wore a simple white dress. Nathan wore the same gray suit he'd worn the first night they danced on that rooftop. They said their vows under a cherry blossom arch, petals drifting in the breeze like confetti. Afterward, at the reception, someone from the office raised a glass. To Nathan and Emma, proof that sometimes the best deals happen outside the boardroom. Everyone laughed. Nathan pulled Emma close and whispered against her ear, "Best investment I ever made." She smiled up at him. Mutual. Years later, they still worked at Vanguard. Emma eventually moved into a strategy role, Nathan stayed partner, but the office was just a place they went during the day. Home was a townhouse in Lincoln Park with a small backyard, weekend brunches, and 2 kids who ran circles around them. The late nights and anonymous emails felt like another lifetime. And every once in a while, when the city was quiet and the lake glittered under moonlight, they'd sit on their own bench, different one, same view, and remember the girl who fell madly in love with her businessman boss, and the man who fell just as hard in return. It hadn't been easy. It hadn't been perfect, but it had been real. And in the end, that was more than enough.